we have a panel that we need to give a big hand of applause.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered now to hear three distinguished gentlemen, two Nobel laureates, Mr. Kailash Satyarthi, founder of the Bachpan Bachao Andolan and chairperson of the Global March Against Child Labor. We've worked closely with Mr. Satyarthi. Also, Nobel laureate, Professor Yuan Tseh, President Emeritus and Distinguished Research Fellow, Academia Sinica. And of course, Dr. R.K. Pachauri. And I'd like to thank him on behalf of all of us for bringing them together on a single stage. Their lives, ladies and gentlemen, can only be described as extraordinary. Before we start this session, I'd like to hear a big round of applause for our Nobel laureates. The first keynote address, I'd call upon Dr. R.K. Pachauri. He's going to talk about Sustainable Development Goals, the road ahead. Sir.
Thank you very much, Karma. It's a great privilege to be in this company, and let me, without further ado, say what I was going to present before this August gathering. We are at a crucial juncture of human history with risks facing the planet that are truly daunting and which have serious implications for all living species. Since the beginning of industrialization, human society has been responsible for emissions of greenhouse gases, as a result of which the concentration of these gases has gone up to levels that are unprecedented in at least the last 800,000 years. Their effects, together with those of other anthropogenic drivers, human-induced drivers, have been detected throughout the climate system and are extremely likely to have been the dominant cause of the observed warming since the mid-20th century. The impacts of climate change are becoming progressively more serious. Rising rates and magnitudes of warming and other changes in the climate system, accompanied by ocean acidification, increase the risk of severe, pervasive, and in some cases, irreversible detrimental impacts. Some risks are particularly relevant for individual regions, while others are global. Climate change is projected to undermine food security. Due to projected climate change by the mid-21st century and beyond, global marine species redistribution and marine biodiversity reduction in sensitive regions will challenge the sustained provision of fisheries productivity and other ecosystem services. For wheat, rice, maize in tropical and temperate regions, climate change without adaptation is projected to negatively impact production for local temperature increases of 2 degrees Celsius or more above late 20th century levels, although individual locations may benefit. Climate change is projected to reduce renewable surface water and groundwater resources in most dry subtropical regions, intensifying competition for water among sectors. I would like to draw your attention to Figure 1, which I'll project now, which shows increases in average temperature, globally average sea level change, globally average greenhouse gas concentrations, and global anthropogenic CO2 emissions. Let me go back to the first part of this diagram. You see the increases in temperature, which is on the top diagram, and you would see that there is a fluctuation. That's because of natural factors which bring about changes in climate, but the trend is unmistakable. And if you look at the lower diagram, that gives you sea level rise. And there's no theorizing in this. This is based on actual observations. I would like to now draw your attention to the next set of diagrams under Figure 1. The first one gives you the increase in concentration of three major gases. The one at the top in green is carbon dioxide, but that doesn't represent green development. it shows very rapid increase in the concentration of carbon dioxide. And the lowermost figure gives you the sources of carbon dioxide emissions. The gray area is emissions from the energy sector, from cement, and flaring of gas which takes place. So clearly the world is going in a direction counter to what is intended in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which came into existence almost a quarter century ago. Anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions in 2010 reached 49 gigatons CO2 equivalent per year. This represented a very large increase over the emissions in the year 2000, which were at a level of 39 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. That means in these 10 years, we have added 10 gigatons of emissions, roughly an average of 1 gigaton per year of CO2 equivalent. At the same time, changes in many extreme weather and climate events have been observed since 1950. It is likely that the frequency of heat waves has increased in large parts of Europe, Asia, and Australia. And it is also likely that human influence has more than doubled the probability of occurrence of heat waves in some locations. Projections of climate change and its impacts till the end of this century only add greater urgency to taking action. Many adaptation and mitigation options can help address climate change, but no single option is sufficient by itself. The fifth assessment report of the IPCC has assessed a large number of mitigation options by which emissions of greenhouse gases can be reduced. Evidence of observed climate change impacts is strongest and most comprehensive for natural systems. In many regions, changing precipitation or melting snow and ice are altering hydrological systems, affecting water resources in terms of quantity and quality. Many terrestrial, freshwater, and marine species have shifted their geographic ranges, seasonal activities, migration patterns, etc. And that's because species obviously move to locations to which they are accustomed in terms of climate. So if the climate changes, you will get migration of species. Apple trees, for instance, will not grow at the same altitude at which they used to grow. They'll move further upwards, and so on. And this is particularly true of fish stocks and marine species. Anthropogenic GHG emissions are mainly driven by population size, economic activity, lifestyle, energy use, land use patterns, technology, and climate policy. The representative concentration pathways, which are used for making projections based on these factors, describe 4 different 21st century pathways of greenhouse gas emissions and atmospheric concentrations. The RCPs, as we call them, include a stringent mitigation scenario, which is RCP 2.6, 2 intermediate scenarios, and 1 scenario with very high greenhouse gas emissions, which is basically a business as usual kind of emission scenario. Now, multi-model results show that limiting total human-induced climate change to less than 2 degrees Celsius would require, at the beginning of industrialization, it required a budget being adhered to of 2,900 gigatons of CO2. That's at the beginning of industrialization. By 2011, we had exhausted 1,900 gigatons of this budget. So what we were left with was roughly 1,000 gigatons, which perhaps we could emit further without crossing this target of 2 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. Now, of course, we're in 2015, so this figure is now much less, probably closer to 800 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. And this is an issue of contention, because the question is, how much space can developing countries utilize in this 800 plus gigatons of CO2 equivalent, and how much are the developed countries going to continue to occupy as far as this limited space is concerned? So the agreement that's going to take place in Paris is going to be based on what is referred to as intended nationally determined contributions. These will be offered by each country, And these INDCs should add up to a total reduction in emissions that would make it possible for the world to move along the pathway that I referred to as the 2.6 RCP pathway. Now, here I want to show you figure 2 shows temperature increases for the 4 different scenarios. Now, you see the spread at the top goes as high as 4.8 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. And at the lower end, we have certainly a much lower level of emissions, actually going down to about 0 or the negative range by the end of this century. And you also have a projection over here of global mean sea level rise. And the uppermost point with the do-nothing scenario, if I could call it that, is 98 centimeters. I was just talking to President Gayoom of the Maldives. Can you imagine what 98 centimeters of sea level rise would mean to the Maldive Islands? Most of those 1,000+ islands in that nation are no more than about a meter or so above sea level. Now, it's virtually certain that global mean sea level will continue to rise for many centuries beyond 2100. So it's not going to end at the end of this century. Things will get progressively worse, even if we stop emissions of greenhouse gases today. And sustainable development and equity provide a basis for assessing climate policies. Limiting the effects of climate change is necessary to achieve sustainable development, because the impacts on some of the poorest regions in the world would make it impossible for them to develop, leave alone developing on a sustainable basis. And therefore, we need to mitigate emissions of greenhouse gases globally, and we have to adapt to the impacts of climate change. Delaying mitigation shifts burdens from the present to the future, and insufficient adaptation responses to emerging impacts are already eroding the basis for sustainable development. If there are communities and societies which are being affected by the impacts of climate change on a continuous basis without appropriate adaptation, obviously they would find it very difficult to develop at all. It can be seen, therefore, that actions to deal with climate change are also an integral part of steps that are required to attain sustainable development. Hence, even though climate change is not likely to be explicitly included in defining the Sustainable Development Goals, it is essential that the SDGs are also directed at goals that will help to meet the adaptation and mitigation requirements which are a part of climate strategy. So basically, it is essential that we think of this as a twin challenge, as a twin opportunity, because you really cannot deal with climate change if we are still going to continue with development on an unsustainable basis. Nor can you carry out sustainable development unless you tackle this growing challenge of climate change, which is going to become progressively more serious in every part of the globe, but certainly much more in some specific parts of the globe. So I think there's an issue of ethics, there's an issue of equity, and there's certainly an issue of understanding the science of climate change. Today we have the knowledge on the basis of which we know the gravity and the seriousness of the problem. We also know the steps that need to be taken to bring about that change. And if we delay action further, then the costs and the feasibility of taking action will go beyond our reach. And the impacts of climate change could cross certain thresholds and certain tipping points beyond which even adaptation may go beyond our reach. So this is the message I would like to provide to this distinguished audience, and I think it's for all of us to act essentially as missionaries of knowledge and spread that knowledge by which awareness would induce action, will inspire people to action in every organization, in every sector, and even at the level of individuals where lifestyle changes can be an important part of mitigation activities. So I wish you all the best. Thank you for this opportunity.
Every time I'm anchoring, I get ticked off by my studio director saying, Karma, you have just 6 minutes left. And today, I never thought I'd be saying the same thing to a Nobel laureate. I have Professor Yuan Tseh. So you have 12 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to come back to Delhi Sustainable Development Summit. I want to express my appreciation for Honorable Dr. Pachauri for organizing this conference and get us all here today. During the last 8 years, I was heavily involved as the president of the International Council of Science on the sustainable development and climate change issues. My term was up last September, and my granddaughter saw me and said, Grandpa, you work so hard. Did you make any difference? I have to be very honest with her. Yes, we tried. Everybody tried. But we are not seeming to really winning the battle as yet. So today, I will not try to preach the converted, as Mr. Laureate said. I would rather make 3 comments from political, social, and scientific comment about sustainable development goals and climate change. Everybody knows, everybody agrees, climate change is a global problem. And it is not going to be solved by scientists or a single country alone. We have to get everybody together. And during the last several years, things are moving, and this year, the COP21 certainly gave people a great hope that something might really happen, and that is a great expectation. I certainly will be able to tell my granddaughter if COP21 was successful in initiating something globally, I would say to my granddaughter, yes, things seem to be hopeful. Especially when we talk about by 2020, not yet solved financial issue of providing $100 billion that would come true. Then people will have more confidence. However, a simple-minded scientist who know a little bit of mathematics know that the $100 billion will not be enough. At the present time, we did see people spend billions of billions, trillions or trillions of dollars try to defend the country from enemy across the border, try to maintain their security, and yet seem to forget that climate change is really going to be our biggest enemy, which will be right on top of us within the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So in order to be successful, I do believe we have to get organized, and we might have to go beyond European Union or United States or United Nations. We might really need to have our organization, might be called United States or Planet of Earth. We really need to get together. Entire world need to work together. By 2050, if we manage to spend trillions of dollars in fighting common enemy, climate change, then when I come back to visit the Earth again, because I'm sure it's 50 years I will not be here, I will see that our next generation certainly appreciate what we have done, and that is really needed more intensive, extensive global collaboration. Now, I want to come back to the second point. I'd like to touch upon the social problem or from the aspect of human development. During the last 50 years, because of the explosion in population and consumption, human society has overloaded the earth. We all know we have overloaded the earth, and humanity on the earth is in danger. But when I said we are overloading the earth system, human society is overdeveloped. People in Africa didn't like to hear that. They said, Professor Lee, we are miserable. We need to develop. Don't say that. Well, people in the overdeveloped countries said, well, we will be able to manage. But still the question is, with the population explosion, consumption explosion, what do we mean by development? We really need 10 kilowatt per people, or 2 kilowatt would be enough. What do we really mean by development? Now you look at Asia. Asia is driving the train. Although the train is moving toward the wrong direction. If you look at China, in the last 3 years, they consume more cement than the entire United States consumed during the last 100 years. But they are still developing. People in Taiwan said, our GDP is only 1/2 of the US. We need to develop, but we are way overdeveloped in Taiwan. So it is really important for us to understand what do we mean by development unless we have common understanding how should we do it, we'll be heading in the wrong direction. There will be no future for humanity. The third point I want to make is from the scientific point of view. 300 years ago, after the Industrial Revolution, human society departed from the nature, departed from sunshine. During the last 150 years, we depend more and more on the fossil fuel and causing climate change problems. So when we talk about go into low carbon society, what we really mean is go back to sunshine. So wind power or solar energy largely go back to sunshine. Yes, science technology develop within the next 10, 20 years. Energy or the electricity generated by solar energy or wind power will certainly be less expensive than the fossil fuel generated electricity. But there's one problem. I was in San Diego. My former student said, Professor Lee, I put solar panel on my roof. Now, I don't buy electricity. Even my car, Nissan Leaf, is charged by solar panel, so I'm not polluting person. And she said, Professor Lee, can you do it? Can you do it? I said, yes, I can do it. If I move back to California, I can do it. The big difference is, in California, population density is 30 per square kilometer. In Taiwan, it's 630 per square kilometer. I only go 1/20 of the sunshine of my former student, Kim Plaster. So there, scientifically, we need to learn to store the electricity or convert electricity into something else so that can transport across the national border. It is really a global problem. And we still need to put lots of effort, lots of money to do scientific research. So when we are harvesting electricity, we can transport across the national border like what we are doing, like petroleum and coal. But that transportation not only need technology, we need to have everybody work together as an entire humanity, as a community. So we need to establish global community. We have to be able to spend billions of dollars, not the defense, against the enemy across the border. We really need to demand ourselves. And we have come a long distance, but still a way to go. But I'm not pessimistic. I don't have right to be pessimistic. If everybody is willing to work on it, I think we will have a chance. Well, I'm really pleased to be able to come here to express my view, and we really have to work hard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Lee. That was wonderful. But as far as Delhi is concerned, you know, some people live in houses as big as the solar panel. So I don't know if we can put up solar panels here. That'll be a challenge for the scientists to work on. Now I call upon Nobel laureate, Mr. Kailash Satyarthi. The topic he'll be speaking on is Globalize Compassion for Sustainability.
Thank you. My dear brother Pachauri ji, Professor Lee, Karma ji, dear sisters and brothers. I'm still a little bit sleepy. I'm coming straight from the airport. Yesterday I was in London and had a packed schedule until evening, and then rushed to the airport and reached a few minutes ago. About 2 months ago, I think, I briefly met Professor Pachauri at the airport, and he informed me about this very important event, and I immediately agreed to come here. I could connect it with a story with some of the children whom I spoke about 2 years ago at length. We have a rehabilitation center for freed child laborers and bonded children in Rajasthan. It's not very remote, but it's not on track, near Viratnagar. And when I started this, we used to pass through a big lake. And it was so beautiful to see that number of animals were drinking water. At one corner, children were jumping and swimming and enjoying their childhood. The women were washing their clothes. So it was beautiful to watch all those things. But it was about 15 years ago. For last 3-4 years, slowly, the lake is completely dried up. So suddenly I started watching a different scene. That group of girls used to go to fetch water from far-off areas. One day I met a group of some very young and teenager girls and sitting with them. One of those girls said that earlier the life was very easy. Now we have to walk at least 2 kilometers or 2.5 kilometers to take water from our survival. Other girls went to take some firewood, and some were collecting fodders. But their biggest problem was that when they used to take water and do their routine work, just across their village, or 2 or 3 village clusters in that lake, the life was easy. Now the girls feel that they are in danger because they have to walk alone. So they have to wait for 2, 3, 4, 5 girls to make a group so that they can walk to get water from far-off areas so that they can remain safe. So the fear was there. But when I asked few of those girls that you are still wearing some school uniform, they replied that, yes, we go to school in the morning and wait until the midday meal is given. There's a big program in India. The hot food is supplied to the children during the school time, in government schools mainly. But after getting that meal, they immediately rush to fetch water and firewood and fodder, and they don't attend the school. Half of the day is gone. Some of them were completely dropped out and became some sort of child laborers. When I asked that, what has happened? I said, of course, the lake dried up. I went in more details that why this lake dried up. It was there for ages, maybe for centuries, but the whole life of the village people got changed. Many people have to leave the village in search of livelihood. They have migrated to Delhi or to Jaipur, and the girls have to bear the cost of it. The young girls, 7, 8, 9-year-old. And I could connect immediately with the climate change issue, that how important is a safe climate for the girls and boys in the world. And that is not just one incident. There are many, many like that. Yesterday I had a very interesting but somehow sad discussion with a group of young people in London. One of them was from Africa, and he was representing a group of African children. They were touring to Britain. He asked me that large number of girls and boys do not attend school in Nigeria. He came from Nigeria. Because of the fear of Boko Haram. When we are talking here, we must know that over 3,500 young girls are abducted and made hostage by ISIS in Yemen and Iraq and Syria. While we are talking here, this boy informed that over 200 girls have been abducted from schools. In fact, there were about 280. So somehow 80 girls fled and successful in coming out. But another 200 are still in hostage of the militant groups. Only a few weeks ago, we have all heard and watched what happened in Peshawar. I was talking to the groups of my friends in Pakistan, and I talked to many more people. And I was told by some that the mothers, especially the mothers, who told, we sent our children in uniforms, and when they came back home, they were in coffins. The schools are not safe for our children. We are living in an unsafe world. That was a young man telling me yesterday. Youth, children are unsafe because of climate change, because of terrorism, because of apathy, because of lack of protection and care and education and health for children in the world. Now, we have two paths. One is that either we are reactive to the fears and risks and dangers we are facing in the world to save ourselves, or to be proactive so that these things don't occur. We can stop them. How we are going to make this world better? Should we keep on destroying it, and then we come back, suddenly see that, oh, we are in danger. Our future is in danger, so we have to do something to save climate and to save childhood and the people, or we have to do something else. In India, thousands of years ago, our masters of wisdom, the spiritual leaders, found two ways to connect. And that connect is a guarantee to make this world safer. One was yoga. That is not physical exercise. Yoga means connect. How you connect with the nature, how you connect with your body, how you connect with your soul, and how you connect with divinity. That connect is yoga. It's not simply taking breathing exercise or doing some physical exercise. Because we believe that the nature is made of 5 key elements: earth, water, fire, air, and space. And the equilibrium between all these was the connect which we have been taught for ages. And that was the core element of Indian culture for thousands of years. And the other thing was yajna. Yajna is not just doing something, putting something in fire or fire worship. It is that how to connect the society for a better present and better future, with some noble objectives, with good intentions, good strategies. And that was defined as yajna in one word. Friends, we live in a world where children are sold and bought like animals, sometimes in lesser price than the animals. We live in a world where almost 60 million children have never seen the school gate or classroom. 150 million other children have dropped out from schools. Children are working in mines and factories, fields and farms and homes and shops at the cost of their childhood and freedom and education. If the children are asking that what the world has given to us, taken away the freedom and taken away the dreams, and what could be the worst crime than the denial of dreams of children, which we are doing now. And that's why if we have to find a path of reconnecting the world, I say this is the path of compassion. We are living in the world of high-speed internets. We are living in the world of connectivity of flights. Hundreds of thousands of flights fly in the air every day. But sometimes we lose our connect with ourselves and with our children. All the revolutions, all the changes, and all the religions were born out of one single thing which is in you and me, and that is compassion. The beginning of transformation begins with the compassion. I'm not talking about pity. I'm talking about the compassion which is transformative, which can connect with the people, which can connect with the environment, which can connect with divinity, so that we can find a path of betterment for ourselves and for our generations to come. We are globalizing knowledge successfully. We are globalizing many more things: markets and economies, products, productions, brands. And this is the time to globalize compassion. If we have to make a safer world, if we have to make a beautiful world, then let us begin with compassion for our children so that the present and future could be saved. We can have a different way of interconnectivity and connecting with the rest of the world. Once again, I'm thankful to all of you.
So what we are going to do is, I'm going to ask both of our Nobel laureates 2 questions, after which we throw the floor open for questions from your side. I'm also told there's a live webcast on, so we might get some questions from the internet for the both of you. So my first question is to Mr. Kailash Satyarthi. Most of us in the Indian media have followed you right from the start. We know your story from the time you rescued the first child. It must have taken a lot, because at that time you were alone, growing, finding like-minded people to work with you. All the challenges are here. Similar challenges are faced by scientists, academia, scholars who are, fighting climate change. My question is, how do we sustain hope to keep the fight going?
Well, Mahatma Gandhi once said a beautiful thing. For a fighter, for anyone who wanted to take a different path and take risk and have courage to take risk, he says, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight with you, and finally you will win. So we have to take the first step and see that it is in the right direction. When we see the change around us, in my own case, every time I rescue a child, I feel that I'm rescuing myself. Every time I see the smile of freedom on the face of that child for the first time, or a sense of childhood is restored back, it brings hope. So we have to find hopes in smaller successes and smaller things instead of waiting for the big thing. Of course, my dream is very simple and clear, that I wanted to make this world free of exploitation of children. I wanted to see in my lifetime that every child in his school. I have a big dream. But I could draw hope and inspiration by small successes. Every single time when a child is freed, I think that the world is getting freed. And one day, eventually, all children would be freed. So the hope comes through small successes. And if the path is right, if the objectives are clear, and it is not very self-centric, then definitely sometimes the failures are also learning. And failures can also bring the hope that we have made some mistakes, so we were not strong enough to take right direction and right action at right time, and we were not so strategic, so we can do it.
So, sometimes when you're lost, you're fighting for something, you're lost in the middle, is it important to go back to the core values that you believed in, or learn from the experiences that you've added on along your path?
I would say that if we think that we have to go back to our core values, it means we have lost our core values somewhere else. So the core values is something which should be the driving force. For me, it is not a political ideology or a kind of religious belief or anything which is my core value. My core value is compassion for children. And that core value is always with me. I don't leave it even for single minute. Right. Because it's transforming the outside environment, but it is also helping in strengthening me inside when I keep my core value intact in me. So it could be several values. Gandhi was the one who has been able to translate and transform the spiritual values of truth and nonviolence into social movement. And he has been able to globalize it, right. Even the political movement. So if I'm calling for the globalization of compassion, I am trying to translate and transform the value, the core value. This is my value, but that is a value of, that could be value of millions of people, right. Into a social movement. So core value must be kept intact.
Right, thank you. Thank you for that reaction. Professor Lee, when I spoke to Dr. Pachauri for the first time about you, and I asked him about you, he says, you are a chemist, but you speak like a philosopher. So I got glimpses of philosophy there. When you spoke about having a simple mind. When we came in, you said, Karma, have a simple mind, and we'll get through. But in today's world, does having a simple mind really work? Because as a journalist, when we go out to cover something, I can say it for myself, as complex as climate change, you get so confused because there are so many issues, so many experts to cover. How do you make it simple? Bring it down to a person walking on the streets of Delhi today to understand?
Well, this is certainly a very difficult thing. But what scientists have been doing is observing complex phenomena and analyzing what is the most important factors and try to solve the problems. I think when you talk about talking to the people on the street, and if you tell them about 2 degrees centigrade and 1.5 degrees centigrade, it doesn't make too much meaning for them. Last year, when we broke the record, very often people in Taipei, temperature 37.5 degrees. Do they care? No. You just turn on the air conditioner, staying home, cool.
And most of them take their shirts off.
No, you don't need to. In the air-conditioned room, without realizing they are producing more carbon dioxide. So in that way, I do feel that the scientists fail communicating with the ordinary people. We probably should stress about the consequences of the global greenhouse gas emission, the consequences of those, and relate 2 degrees centigrade to extreme weather and discontinuity a little better. And otherwise, people say, so what? I woke up in the morning, now it's 5 degrees warmer. In the seasons, there's a 40-degree difference. How come you're so stingy and talking about 1.5 degrees? And that's something we have to learn to communicate. So complex system is a simple, basic, fundamental law governing it. So we have to analyze those carefully.
Right. Temperature on the stage is, I think, 5 degrees higher right now because of these lights also. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say that the kind of pioneering work that Satyarthi ji has been carrying out will become infinitely more difficult and complex with the impacts of climate change. Why? Because pockets of poverty we have projected will enlarge, not only in the developing countries, but also in the developed countries. There will be displacement of people. Displacement is already taking place. There will be conditions which could lead to conflict. The drivers of conflict will be. And you know, the small farmer is going to be particularly at a disadvantage because the impacts of climate change are going to be very harmful for his own productivity. And he doesn't sell to the market.
Yeah.
He produces just about enough food to take care of his own family. So I think with these stresses, things are going to become far more difficult unless we take timely action. And I'm glad Minister Fabius this morning spoke about climate disruption. Now, climate disruption will also translate, in my view, to social disruption. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the means by which we can prevent the kind of problem that he has spent his entire career dealing with would be to see that we take climate change seriously.
Right, and we are already seeing the impact on smaller farmers because last year we traveled to Vidarbha doing a story on the cotton farmers there and the suicide rates going up, and we could already see the impact. We'd just like to open up for questions now, have about 7 minutes left. Yeah, if you could just pass on the mic here. We'd like you to introduce yourself and then ask your question and refrain from a statement, please.
Thank you. I think Professor Lee made some wonderful points, and I would just like to put it this way, that on this planet of ours, we have definitely overloaded the planet, and all species are going down in numbers except the one you see in the mirror. And since that is the case, I would like to know from Mr. Satyarthi.
Yes.
China has had one-child policy for 30 years. Would you advocate that for India as the second most populous nation?
Well, I would go the other way. We have seen in many countries where the state and society has been able to ensure quality education for children and literacy for adult people, then the population growth has been controlled. But on the other hand, we have also seen, not only seen, there are good researches available that wherever the children are freely allowed to work and earn some money, the parents think that more hands means more earning, or more hands means more children. So they keep on growing more children. There was a study in India some years ago that in certain pockets, like in Mirzapur, in Firozabad, where the Bengal industry is situated, and the Mirzapur area is known for carpet industry, hundreds of thousands of children were working those days in these areas. And the population growth rate was higher in comparison to the places where the children are not allowed to work. In Kerala, for instance, some parts of Kerala where all children are going to school and parents are educated. So the education is the key to solve many problems, including the population explosion. The imposition is something which worked in a different situation, but we are living in a different world now. We are not living 50 years ago. We are more democratic, we are more rational, we are more progressive. So education is the key.
I think the moment that's done, a government will fall here in India, which is more likely.
It is an experience.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, here. Good afternoon to the distinguished panelists. I'm Anchal Gupta. I represent Huffington Post India. As Professor Satyarthi very eloquently put it, that climate disruption essentially is causing the loss of health and the loss of education for children. So my question is, what is the concrete solution to it in the near term? Especially like what should be the next policy steps that the governments, especially in countries like India, should take in order to avoid the runaway climate change affecting the health and education and future of children? Because let's face it, GDP growth rates and rising incomes are not going to ensure that future for the children who, first of all, do not get the education or the health to earn their incomes in the future.
Well, I have been proposing what I call the 7E formula. 7E is first is education, good quality, equitable, inclusive education. B, employability. C, entrepreneurship. Fourth is efficiency, equity, and environment, and ethics. When we put these 7 E's together, we cannot separate it. We cannot compartmentalize education with ethics, or education with employability, or education with environment. So all these things have to be put together in such a way and knitted together so that we can go for a sustainable society and sustainable environment and sustainable world. So sustainability, in my opinion, lies in the combination of these 7 E's, where the guiding factor should be the ethics and morals, which applies in every sphere of life.
Okay, just one question from the lady here. We've run out of time. Can you pass the mic here, please?
Good afternoon, the distinguished panel. I am Ananya Dasgupta from All India Women's Conference. It's an age-old NGO which was established in 1927 by Mrs. Margaret Cousins, Maharani Gayatri Devi, and all the other female freedom fighters are involved in this NGO. Actually, as a part of my NGO, I had gone to an Anand Vihar slum where I found that the people out there are staying in a very filthy condition. There is a lack of drainage, proper drainage system. There is no toilet, and all the children there are suffering from deficiency disorders. I wrote a project. I went to NDMC, I went to EDMC, I went to Delhi Urban Shelter Improvement Board. They are unable to help me out. So, I request you, they were all telling that where the funds will come. We can process your project, but where the fund is coming. Now, since in this Millennium Development Goal we are targeting for smart cities, why don't we convert slums to smarter slums? That's my question.
I think this question should be asked to the government of India and the state government and NDMC, but definitely the new move towards Swachh Bharat could be a good flagship program. It has to be embraced by the society, and the government and society have to work together. Of course, more strategic efforts have to be made, more investment has to be made, more capacities to be built in the municipal corporations and municipal societies. So these efforts are needed, but I think it's a good move and we all can collaborate for that.
Okay, I've already received 2 slips, so I'm extremely sorry. I apologize if you could not take your questions. With that, we come to the end of this session. Would like to thank Professor Lee, Mr. Kailash Satyarthi, and Dr. Pachauri for this wonderful session. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a big round of applause for them? Thank you very much.